So a couple days ago, back in the United Kingdom, your whereabouts these days, Ben Whittaker, the very talented former silver medalist, gets another first round knockout against Brian Suarez of Argentina. Suarez, not a contender, but a fighter with some power, 20 knockouts and 21 wins. This is now his fourth knockout loss and 5 of his overall losses. But to give credit to Ben Whittaker, back-to-back first-round knockouts and 3 wins in 4 rounds total over his last 3 fights, including that KO over Liam Cameron, who made him go life and death, had a bizarre ending in the one blemish on his record, a draw. And Whittaker is 28. He's much older than Moses Saitama, 5 years older than Xander Zayas, who's fighting at the elite level of the sport in June. And so this has a lot of people maligning his level of opposition, understandably, pointing out that he's a 28-year-old prospect. But I do remember not so long ago, Bruce Shushu Carrington, the WBC featherweight champion, he said, okay, I'm a 28-year-old prospect, and after this fight with Carlos Castro, I'm going to be a 28-year-old world champion. And well, I bring that up to say things can change quickly. Whittaker is ranked in the top 5 by the IBF and the WBC. He clearly possesses a lot of hand speed, physical talent, and good punching power. He does need to step up his level of opposition. But I think since that draw to Cameron, he's turned the corner a bit. He talked after the fight, Raheem, about Terence Crawford not telling him no longer to play with his food. And he hasn't been playing with his food as much. But he's still playing with it a little bit. He still did the look off after getting underneath a hook in the first minute of the fight. He's still tying up anytime a fighter gets close, which is something talented, fast, rangy fighters do. If you don't want to give a rugged puncher from Argentina his best chance to get his work done, which would be on the inside where he's not as outgunned in physical talent on the outside, I understand that. But at some point, he's going to have to show that wrinkle in his game. He's going to have to step up against domestic talent, let alone world-level talent, like your Lyndon Arthurs, your Josh Buatzis, Anthony Yards, etc. So I get it. 28 years old, time to speed things up. But I think he's fighting well and using his lead hand more consistently. He's a good talent. It was a good performance.
Hey, first round victories, you really can't ask for much more.
Right.
He's not fighting cab drivers and tomato cans. Granted, the level is ready and waiting to be improved, but he's moving at a reasonable pace, and you can't put his age as a detriment to his progression because he can only fight the fights that make sense at the level he's at and be on a trajectory to where he wants to go with a reasonable progression in that direction. He's not so old that he needs to rush, and he's not young enough to play with his food in the sense of putting on fights and continuing down the line of first round knockout type of opponents for too much longer. With what was said by Terence Crawford, it harkened back to the feeling I got from Terence in New York after the Shakur Stevenson win at the tennis stadium. I think we had this conversation about what I was thrilled to see and expected to be forthcoming from Crawford post-Canelo fight, which is he is going to sit like the Don, like the Yoda, like the wise man. He's not old, but he is wise, and he is well regarded and held in high esteem from all of these younger fighters. And I believe that's a blessing because maybe Terence Crawford moves us past the Floyd Mayweather era and the mentality of the Floyd Mayweather influence over what seemed to be 100% of a young black, particularly boxer's mind, especially in America, but even broader. Like, he was the model. Now, the Floyd influence is not going to dissipate completely, nor should it, but it needs to be tempered with, I believe, the Crawford mentality. I like that influence. I believe that Crawford enjoys that role with these young fighters and some that were in his era that are still in the game. He has a relationship with Clarissa Shields. I think she benefits from that. And I like the way that fighters regard him. He's going to use that influence well. With that said, I think what we're looking at right now is a transitional phase for Ben Whittaker. It's a good time to start taking that advice. It's a good time right before you level up, and I believe the talk on the street might be Anthony Yard next. Love that fight. That's a good next step if that is in fact true. I could see that happening, and the look off that much. I don't begrudge him that. A little bit of flair, sure. The antics from prior, too much for me. But this is the moment when he will really define what kind of fighter he's going to be. And so one of the outlets here in the UK deemed him the next superstar in the sport of boxing, which is high praise and maybe a bit out over their skis. It's possible, but then we're going to need to see the Matchroom management team do a hell of a job with crafting his public image. Because right now, I think he's got flair. I think he, as you said, overcame kind of the Cameron thing where people were starting to doubt him. He's got the right trainer with Andy. Mm-hmm. He's getting first-round knockouts.
Yeah.
He's well-spoken, likable, but there's an it factor that is yet to be seen. And sometimes that's part of the packaging. Sometimes you just got to have that fight and have that moment. But to be a superstar, especially hearkening from the UK, is difficult. I'm not sure how he bridges that gap and becomes that guy. That is a challenge for Matchroom in as much as it is for Ben Whittaker.
I think it's not as difficult in a boxing rabid country in the United Kingdom as it would be in many other places, maybe even including the United States. And when you talk about it factor, there's a lot of champions but few stars in boxing. The question, I think, is more, can he be a quality champion? Because I think he has the it factor as far as stardom goes. He went viral many fights ago, a couple years ago, getting shared by people that don't even really watch the sport like that, with some of those flashy antics, the kind of Roy Jones-like stuff he was doing, right? And I think he has that going for him. The question is, can the steak match the sizzle, which we've talked about with him previously. And I'll quickly touch on the Crawford-Mayweather thing and then get back to Ben, too, is, yeah, you're right in terms of it tempering but not canceling out the Floyd-Mayweather influence, because someone like Clarissa Shields is friends with and acknowledges both and takes notes and advice and admires both. And I think they both have their good and bad qualities like any other human being, right? We're not, of course, discussing infallible gods here, but very, very great and deservedly esteemed fighters. And I think, you got Floyd, whose negative influence was being, the micromanaging of opponent selection, even though he ultimately put up a more sterling resume than Terence Crawford. But the perfect timing of it all, the downplaying of a perceived threat that doesn't match the reward, and being all the things we know about Floyd. But then to his credit, he became a box office superstar by eating what he killed, whereas Terence ultimately went, I've talked about all this already before, Terence went the route of getting the Saudi money infused and all that, whereas Floyd was actually able to draw that consistently to the box office by about a decade. But they're both great fighters that will continue to be pulled and learned from, and I agree with your assessment, because Crawford is a little bit more of a killer in the ring, a little bit more go for the jugular in the ring, hence his KO percentage, embodying that north of 140 pound, 147, whereas Floyd's fights went to decision, and a little bit more, brutal in that. A little bit more, I just like to beat someone's ass. And with or without, and of course I want the big check like any other fighter, but I'm a prize fighter too and all that. But a little bit more emphasis on the craft of beating someone down in the boxing ring and tempering it with all that. I lost some of my train of thought because you brought up a lot of good points about Whitaker. So take it from here so I can regather them.
The superstar moniker is bigger than the star moniker. It's a superstar.
Superstar.
So yeah, he's already a star here in the UK,
Right.
but he's far from a superstar. Superstar is Floyd Mayweather. Superstar is Manny Pacquiao. Superstar is Prince Nassim, right? And who had more antics, who had more showmanship or clowning moments in the ring than him. And so I see him starting there. I don't see him staying there. I think he's going to have to fight more in a serious mentality and pick his moments to kind of give us some flashes of flair, if you will. But that's what I mean. I'm not sure what his brand will become that gives it the it factor that separates him. I don't think it'll be the showmanship. I don't think it'll be that, right? I think it might be that if he can carry this kind of performance forward, what if we're looking at a knockout specialist? Like if he can handle a yard anywhere near like he's handled his last couple of fights, that's a wow factor. If he get these kind of, I would say more than the look off and the wind up punch and the clowning and the shuffle, if you can get a string of highlight knockouts at that weight with valid opponents, that will blow you up, right? I think Matchroom is good at matching opponents tough. Like right now, he's doing what he should be doing, but once he steps beyond this line, I think Matchroom's going to be looking to put him in the deep waters and test him. And if he's able to meet those tests in spectacular fashion, then it's just down to the likability, the personality, and the way he promotes himself. Floyd Mayweather influence that I believe is a bit corrosive, or at least I don't enjoy seeing in young fighters, is the protecting the O. And when I say protecting, of course nobody wants to lose. I'm not saying that you're ducking everybody to protect it, but fighters are looking at that O like the end-all, be-all, and so they will protect it and pick an opponent. And so they will think that, well, just getting the win is enough. Exciting doesn't matter.
Right.
Stoppages don't matter.
Thank you. Yeah.
Fighting 12 rounds of every minute doesn't matter. I just need to do just enough to win. That's what Floyd taught us. Undisputed doesn't matter. Like that part of the mentality. And, there was a time there where they were starting to be like, hey, maybe just being an asshole is cool and nothing else matters, right? That's the part that I hope is tempered by this more killer instinct.
Yes.
By a more serious approach to your career and your challenges, right? I don't even know if serious is the right word. That I could say.
No, like Floyd was more safety first approach at a certain point of his career, and when Crawford got to the same age, Floyd really implemented that approach. He was still getting knockout after knockout and hunting for traditional goals like undisputed, pay-per-view, box office king or not, be damned. Yes, and that's what you mean. That's what you're articulating better than I was able to get to. So thank you.
Yeah, that is it. That is it.
And that kind of seriousness and influence showing on Ben Whittaker and mentioning it in the post-fight is paying positive dividends for him as a fighter in the ring with his recent performances. Like that is the good part of the Terence Crawford influence, admitted by the fighter himself.
And we'll see, I believe, from this fight forward, how he deals with the levels. I do believe that it's going to be a step-up fight next. Headed to America, like I said, the Matchroom challenge of making Ben a superstar is as big as his own challenge of being a superstar in the ring and carrying that well outside the ring. Coming to America right now is the right move at the right time, especially if they line up a solid, credible opponent. That is savvy. He's as confident as he's gonna be. Getting first round knockouts, needs some rounds, but if he continues to get stoppages, comes over to the States, maybe on a big card, I don't know if he's headlining in the States. Like I think he would benefit from being on a bigger card than he could headline in the States, and with a valid opponent putting on a hell of a performance could break him out. But what I consider to be a level of superstar is pretty rarefied air. To give you an impression of how much I think that brand means, like I said, Manny Pacquiao, Floyd Mayweather, but if we're going to come to the UK, Prince Nassim, Tyson Fury, but not until the Joshua-Jake Paul fight, ironically, would I have classified Anthony Joshua as a superstar. That fight actually tipped him over the scales. And so you've got to have some recognition globally, have people know your name, know who you are outside of the region that you're from and outside of the boxing fan, even outside of the casuals. Anthony Joshua himself, as huge as he is in the UK, and I would say no one bigger in the UK than Anthony Joshua at his peak, didn't reach superstardom until Jake Paul.
Yeah, I don't see that. I mean, like you said, it's very rarefied air. And look at the gimmick it took a kind of hopefully once in a lifetime kind of preposterous gimmick that made Joshua that star in the United, Jake Paul, which didn't exist in boxing ever before this time we are living in right now. And Prince Nassim, to the other names you mentioned, although a great featherweight and one of the great punchers, a little bit of the exception to the rule. Your Canelos, your Floyds, your De La Hoyas, these are legitimately, all-time great fighters. Hamed, a great fighter in his own right, but not of their caliber. And a oddball and an eccentric personality, and an oddball in the sense of that kind of punching power and that kind of division. So he was lightning in a bottle, and I don't see Ben Whittaker doing that. I see him being potentially a star, and I think like a more popular, maybe a little bit harder hitting James DeGale, who won a gold medal and was a world champion. And that's no slight on James DeGale. Actually, if I'm James DeGale, I'm going to say, well, hold up, let the motherfucker. The guy hasn't even won a belt yet. I was at one point. Right. In a unification and maybe the best 168-pounder in the world. Can he prove himself first? And I want a gold, not a silver. But I think, he could be like I think a more realistic projection is a ticket-selling, harder puncher. I think that's a good goal, James DeGale.
UK has produced a lot of those. And this is, again, me reading from the headlines here in the UK. So I don't know, maybe Matchroom planted the headline. Yeah. But that's how difficult it is, for whatever reason, for UK fighters to get that big. There are just very few you could list. So I'm dialed in. I am interested and intrigued by where Ben Whittaker goes next and how big he can get. I like the adjustments I'm seeing. I like the mentality that Andy has brought to the corner. I like the way Matchroom is moving him, and I would like to see this next opponent at the next level.
I think I'll take a stab at who his next opponent will be. All right, I'll take a shot. I think it'll be Khalil Cole, because Khalil's from New Jersey. Eddie, I know he did not. He was fortunate to get a decision against Jesse Hart last time. He blew weight by 8 pounds. So I don't know how much Eddie Hearn is going to ultimately trust him with this assignment, but it'll be a good payday for Khalil Cole. He's an East Coast fighter, and ultimately this is supposed to be a commercial for Ben Whittaker. So you got to balance your ambition with your cynical side, Raheem, and say just how tough are they going to put him in there, especially with memories of Joshua Ruiz for Eddie. Are you going to put him in that tough, in that murky of waters, or are you want to serve up a commercial to the American fan base on a big card? I think Khalil Cole is just credible enough, just decent enough, but not too dangerous to derail the commercial.
Yeah, I think that won't get it done. I mean, now you're building with one brick at a time, laying a whole foundation. You have to do more than we're going to do more than that fight. You know what I mean? It's like also
You need a splash. Is
Anthony.
what you're saying. Yeah,
You need a splash. Anthony Yard looks the part. He's got the resume. He's got the experience. That'll be part of the conversation. And Khalil, you can't trust him, especially with Whitaker's fights of late falling out, his card getting derailed. You can't trust them. And if it is the two of them at the top of the card, it won't be a big event.
Okay,
like Khalil's not a draw. Whitaker's not coming to America on a head of steam where he's filling out any significant size arenas on his own name. If the matchup ain't pulling the weight, that to me is an undercard fight somewhere, or a small show. I see you working.
I'm
and
being
you might
realistic.
Be right.
It's not it's not my first choice here.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what my first choice is, which is why it probably won't happen, but I think you'll love the idea. There's a Puerto Rican American undefeated light heavyweight who was in the fight of the year so far, Najee Lopez.
Okay.
Now we're talking. Yeah, Najee Lopez.
Now you're putting some gifts under the tree.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm with that. All right. We'll have to get Eddie on the line. Let him know. Huh?
That's a great fight.
Yeah. That's the kind of scrap that could live in people's memories.
Now that's a co-main.
Yeah. All right.
Eddie.
Eddie.
We're doing Eddie Murphy references, right? We got Coming to America.
That's
Eddie, don't treat us like animal.
Oh, yeah. We need. I was about to say something that was definitely going to get pause in the comments there.
All right.
Ben Whittaker raw.
Ben Whittaker raw. Well, all right. Hey.
Let's
see it.